welcome to the annual meeting. The following has appointed here is Mrs. Martha Bowles for annual meeting. Secretaries of election, Rachel Arlene Rousum, Mary Shambo, Robin Spalding, clerk Mrs. Brenda Shelmadine. I would like a motion to appoint the meeting chairperson for the budget vote on June 9th. That would be Mrs. Marcia Mundy.
So move.
I'll second it.
All right.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I guess it passes. I now would like to introduce the permanent chairperson, Mrs. Margaret Nevels, and she will now take over the meeting.
I'll begin by reading the annual meeting notice. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the qualified voters of the Copenhagen Central School District. I'm hearing the recording over and over
Yeah,
again.
you need to turn your YouTube off, Peg. That's the same thing I was having. So you got to get rid of YouTube.
Okay. All right. Turned it off. Okay, are we ready? I thought I did. There, how's that? Okay. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the qualified voters of the Copenhagen Central School District, Lewis County, Copenhagen, New York, will be available virtually on Friday, May 29th, 2020 at 3:00 p.m. prevailing time for the presentation of the budget. A link will be provided to the public on the Copenhagen Central School website, www.ccsnights.org, Facebook, Copenhagen Central School pages, and Parent Square. The budget and the tax exemption report may be obtained by any resident of the district during the 14 days immediately preceding the annual meeting on the school website, www.ccsnights.org, Facebook, Copenhagen Central School pages, and Parent Square. Notice is hereby given that the annual budget vote and school budget election of the qualified voters of the Copenhagen Central School District, Village of Copenhagen, Copenhagen, New York, will be held by absentee ballot by qualified voters. The following items will be voted upon. To elect one member of the Board of Education to succeed the following current member, Gabrielle Thompson, 5-year term, July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2020. And further notice is hereby given that at said annual budget vote and election to be held on June 9th, 2020, the following propositions will be submitted. Proposition 1. Resolved that the Board of Education of the Copenhagen Central School District is hereby authorized to expend the sums set forth in the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021 and to levy the necessary tax for the requisite portion thereof to be raised by taxation on the taxable property of the district. Proposition 2. Shall the district be authorized to provide transportation of Head Start children from Copenhagen Central School to Lowville Head Start and return on an existing BOCES bus route? Shall the district be authorized to provide transportation of Head Start children from Copenhagen Central School to their homes in the afternoon on an existing PM bus route? This will demand no additional costs to the district. Proposition 3, establishment of a general capital reserve fund 2020. Should the Board of Education be authorized to establish a new capital reserve fund 2020 capital reserve, not to exceed $2 million, to be funded by the district from budgetary appropriations or existing unappropriated fund balance on hand, and to be expended only upon future voter approval for the purpose of financing either the full or partial costs of any capital or capital outlay addition, improvement, or other object or purpose for which the district would otherwise be able to seek and issue bonds pursuant to the local finance law, and to replenish payments therefrom for subsequent years by annual budgetary appropriations of the district or from existing unappropriated fund balance on hand at a rate not to exceed $200,000 per annum, with the proposed term of such fund being 20 years. And further notice is hereby given that candidates for school board must self-nominate. No signatures are required for self-nomination. The other required information for self-nomination must be contained within the filing such that the eligibility of the candidate may be verified by the district clerk no later than Monday, May 11th, 2020. Please contact the district clerk to complete an affidavit of qualification and expenditure statement. And further notice is hereby given. Absentee ballots must be received by the district clerk not later than 5:00 p.m. on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. The education law makes special provisions for absentee voting for military voters of the district. Specifically, the law provides a unique procedure for military ballots in school district votes. Whereas absentee ballot applications and absentee ballots must be received by the voter by mail, email, or facsimile. The military voter must, however, return his or her original military ballot application and military ballot by mail or in person. The clerk of the board shall transmit the military ballot in accord with the military voter's preferred method of transmission. The clerk of the board must then receive the military voter's military ballot by mail or in person not later than 5:00 p.m. on the day of the vote. A list of persons to whom absentee ballots have been issued will be available for public inspection in the office of the district clerk between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Wednesdays until the date of election. Any qualified voter may, upon examination of such list, file a written challenge to the qualifications as a voter of any person whose name appears on such list, stating the reasons for such challenge. And further notice is hereby given that pursuant to a rule adopted by the board in accordance with 2035 of education law, any referenda or propositions to amend the budget otherwise to be submitted for voting at said election must be filed with the Copenhagen Central School District Board of Education at the district office on or before May 12th, 2020 at 4:00 p.m. prevailing time. Must be typed or printed in English. Must be directed to the clerk of the school district. However, the school board will not entertain any petition to place before the voters any proposition the purpose of which is not within the powers of the voters to determine, or any proposition which fails to include a specific appropriation where the expenditure of monies is required by proposition. Would the clerk please read the qualification of voters?
Sure. Education law section 2012 defines a qualified voter as being, number one, at least 18 years of age. Number two, United States citizen. Number three, a resident of the school district for 30 days immediately preceding the election. and 4, not otherwise prohibited from voting under the provisions of Section 5106 of the election law, which is a person who has been adjudged to be mentally incompetent.
Okay. Due to the COVID-19 rules of the rules of order really don't apply, so we would like you to please leave your comments on YouTube. The budget for the 2020-2021 school year has been duly adopted by the Board of Education, distributed to district voters in accordance with education law. Per executive order from Governor Cuomo, all school budget votes will take place on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. Voting will take place via absentee ballot. Absentee ballots were mailed on Friday, May 22nd, 2020, with a postage-paid return envelope. If you did not receive a ballot in the mail or would like one or any additional ballots for your household, please call Brenda Shelmadine, District Clerk, at 315-688-4411 or email at bshelmadine@ccsnights.org. Ballots can also be dropped off at the Copenhagen Central School District Office. Ballots are to be returned by June 9th, 2020 at 5:00 p.m. in order to be canvassed. Ballots will be opened starting at 5:01 p.m. on June 9th, 2020 via YouTube Live. Will the superintendent and the district treasurer please review the budget document? YouTube viewers may post questions and they will be addressed. You're muted, Mr. Connell.
Thank you. Thank you, Peg. And we apologize for the technical problems in the beginning. And we will begin now. The first slide up is just some pictures of our kids doing really neat things. The plays, our activities, donkey basketball, and so forth. Next slide involves our athletics and some of our drama kids and just all the things different than academics that go on at our school. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to introduce the budget and the development process, the property tax cap card, the tax levy history and data comparison, where the school budget and dollars are spent, where the school dollars come from, a budget summary, propositions and Board of Education candidates, vote and election date. And as Peg mentioned, if you have any questions, you can type them in the YouTube channel on the right side. And at this point, I will turn this over to Mr. Luther.
Thank you, Mr. Connell. To start, as I did last year and I will every year, I just want to give you a little bit of background on the budget development. We spend a considerable amount of time putting together a responsible budget for our taxpayers, and we leverage a number of resources. We contract Questar State Aid Planning, as well as fiscal advisors. The business officials of other area component districts of our BOCES collaborate as well. And for complicated issues, I may engage our school auditor and or our school attorney. Moving on to the property tax report card. This is a high-level view, a snippet from our report card that gets submitted to the state. But it covers the important points. Our proposed total expense increase is up approximately $210,935 or 1.92%. Our proposed tax levy increase is going to be 2%, and our tax cap this year, as calculated, I'll get into in just a moment, was 18.32%. For the enrollment component, last year we projected 484 individuals. The actual reported was 461. I have conservatively projected enrollment to at least maintain steady. And we saw a decrease in the consumer price index as provided by the state down to 1.81%. Moving on to the tax levy history data comparison and the tax cap. On the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see a 15-year history of the tax levy and the levy delta. This year, is very much congruent with previous years. At 2%, we would be looking for a levy delta of approximately $34,721. This is very different from what the tax cap would allow us to go to, and I'm just going to zoom in on this onto another slide. Now, the tax cap formula is consisted of many variables, and all of those variables that go into the tax cap will make that cap fluctuate either up or down. And last year, many taxpayers would recall that we had a fairly significant negative tax cap. So what I did over the course of this past year was implement a model that allows us to project a tax cap into the future. And we instituted that last year, and we will continue that ongoing. And what it allows us to do is evaluate how all of the variables will affect the tax cap, not just for this year, but future years down the road. With the final calculated tax cap this year of 18.32% that was submitted to the state, the levy would stand to be $318,114. Obviously, that wouldn't be possible to implement amongst the tax base here. So after discussion with the board, we are issuing a proposed levy increase of 2%. Moving on to where the school dollar is spent. As a requirement for school districts, we are required to present the expenses of the budget in three main components, which are administrative, program, and capital. The administrative component at a high level covers the office of administrative costs, salaries and benefits, certified school administrators, data processing, property insurance, things of that nature. The program component includes the salaries and benefits of teachers and staff, supplies, textbooks, equipment, and all of the aspects of the expenses for instructional programs for students. Lastly, the capital component includes all transportation capital, which would be bus purchases, custodial and facility costs, debt service, lease expenditures, a number of ranging things that make up this component. I will go into each one of these individually. However, I just wanted to point out, in comparison to last year, the percentages are fairly congruent. Last year, the capital component was 24%. In this coming fiscal year, we're expecting it to be 22%. The administrative component maintained steady at 11%, and the program increased by 2% from 65%. So we'll jump into the administrative component and some of the details of that. We're expecting a $52,000 increase, or a 4.51% in total. At the Board of Education level, this would include portions of salary for the district clerk, board policy updates, the annual meeting vote, BOCES workshops, and legal notices that go out. The central administration and finance include salaries for the superintendent, the business office, portions of the secretary to the superintendent, and a tax collector. It also includes our costs for fiscal planning, auditing, state planning, or state aid planning, and cooperative purchasing through BOCES. For curriculum development and supervision, this includes our salaries for our principals, our secretaries to our principals, their memberships, and supplies to run our offices. Legal and personnel include salaries and expenses related to the personnel record retention, legal fees required related to personnel, and access to legal counsel through our BOCES. Other essential services includes our school insurance, our dues, postage costs, managing and maintaining data processing, and BOCES services for data processing administration and student management services. And lastly, all of the employees that fit within those line items that I just described, all of the benefits, the employee benefits that go into this are listed here, which include the employee retirement system, the teacher retirement system, Social Security, Medicare, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, health insurance, dental insurance, and so forth. Moving on to the largest piece, as it should be, the program component. Just as a recap, these are the salaries and benefits of all teachers and staff, as well as all aspects related to instructional programs for our students. In total, we expect to see an increase of 4.66%. and I'll go into each of these line items as well. This year, we hope to include a census for our district. We haven't had one in quite some time, and we're hoping to accomplish a couple of things with the census. So we built that into this year's budget. The teaching of regular and special education includes all of the instructional and non-instructional employees, all of the hardware, maintenance contracts, medical services, dues, fees, subscriptions, textbooks, students attending BOCES programs, health and medical and special education services, and technology support, everything revolving around educating our students. The transportation portion includes transportation director and all the transportation related employees, as well as services and supplies to support the operation, maintenance, and of the transportation department and all of the related equipment of that department. And lastly, all of the employee benefits within this component are lumped in and presented here. Again, including employee retirement system, teachers retirement system, health, dental insurance, and so forth. Lastly, the capital component, just a quick recap, all transportation capital, which would be our bus purchases, custodial and facility costs, debt service, legal judgment, settled claims, supplies, utilities, maintenance, repairs, everything that makes this building what it is, and everything that it takes to run this building. This year, we expect to see a $175,000 decrease. I'll go into each of these lines and explain some of that. So I left this here. We don't expect any BOCES capital costs. Last year, we budgeted $204,066 with the anticipating another expense of approximately $171,000 to fulfill our obligation to our Jefferson Lewis BOCES in Watertown for their capital project. Due to the tax cap and the way that some legislation came out after the fact in January of this year, New York State required that we recalculate our tax cap, which messed with the projections that I had originally planned for at the end of last year when our tax cap was submitted. So the best way to accomplish stabilizing that tax cap was to pull the expense that we anticipated for this year or for next year into the 2019-2020 year. So I just left it this year for reference purposes, but we will not have an expense for that BOCES capital cost this year. In addition, I left this here for reference purposes. The district historically has not had a capital outlay project program. In the near future, I intend to pick that up and begin starting in 2021, 2022, the planning of our next project, which would be a $100,000 capital outlay project. That's one of the components and the variables that goes into our tax cap planning, and it alleviates some of the stress on our buildings and grounds department to be able to build, repair, maintain, and improve the facilities on an ongoing basis. The debt service, think of it like your mortgage and interest. This includes all of our school bond principal and interest payments. The operations and maintenance, again, this is the salaries for the supervisor of buildings and grounds and all of our custodial staff. It includes all of the supplies and the support of the operation and maintenance of the entire facility. Lastly, transportation equipment. We are anticipating the purchase of a regular bus, a wheelchair bus, and an SUV. And the employee benefits for all of the employees within this section. And again, that includes ERS, TRS, Social Security, FICA, Medicare, workers' comp, health, dental, and so forth. So in summary, within the three component presentation, this is a breakdown of all of the costs and the expenses that we've put forth for the 2020-2021 fiscal year, totaling $11,207,621. Since we've covered the expenses, it's only right to cover the revenues, where the school dollar comes from. As you can see, the majority of our revenues come from state and federal aid. followed next by our property tax levy, which would be the taxes and the 2% that we have proposed. And this year, something that I'll go into a little bit more detail on is the appropriated fund balance would come into third. And then we also have some smaller items, which would include our payments in lieu of taxes, which would be the result of the windmills that you see around our district, as well as other miscellaneous income, for instance, interest and earnings on cash on hand. So conservatively, we'd originally projected a modest increase in state aid. However, given the circumstances of this year and the pandemic that came about, we've modified our projections, and we are expecting a deficit on state aid just to responsibly prepare in the off chance that the governor comes through on what he's been saying publicly, that there may be state aid cuts to schools. So as a result of that, what you'll notice is a reasonably sizable increase in the appropriated fund balance. And we felt it important to maintain a responsible levy increase of 2% and use cash reserves that we have on hand to be able to balance the budget. And that's what makes up that significant increase in the appropriated fund balance, is a projected deficit of state aid revenues. So after covering all of that, I'll just go through a budget summary really quick. I expect our expenses to increase responsibly. I don't foresee any major catastrophes happening from the expense side. And I truly believe that we worked hard to put together a responsible budget with a responsible tax levy increase. We are unfortunately expecting a revenue deficit year over year due to the pandemic. However, apart from this ongoing crisis, I do believe that this budget's going to continue to expand the programs for our students, and we will continue to reach our students in very creative ways. We did this year, and if we're challenged to do the same next year, we will absolutely do that. And having gone through all of that, we just ask for all of you as taxpayers for your continued support of this district and of this budget with a yes vote on your absentee ballot, which must be received by the district or by 5 p.m. on June 9th. And I'm going to turn it over now to Superintendent Connell to go over the propositions and the Board of Education candidate, as well as the vote and the election date, and then to take any questions that we may have gotten over the presentation. And I think you're muted, Mr. Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Luther. A very in-depth description of our budget. Mrs. Nevels in the beginning explained these propositions. Proposition 1 is just the vote itself. Proposition 2 is the transportation of Head Start, and she did mention that that is no additional cost to the district. Some years we have kids and some years we don't. And Proposition 3 is to create a capital reserve. And Scott, if you want to mention a little bit about that.
Sure. So this year was a unique year. We underwent the construction, or we're in the process right now of kicking it off, the construction of a capital project. And for that capital project, we leveraged an existing capital reserve. So after consulting with our school auditor and our school attorney, it was appropriate to request a proposition on this year's vote to instantiate a capital reserve with responsible dollar amounts with a proposed term, which would essentially include an end to it, which we set to be 20 years.
Thank you. So we also have one candidate running for a 5-year term, Gabriella Thompson, who has been on our board for a while and has done a great job. She will be running unopposed. And as we mentioned before, different than in the past, these are absentee ballots. They are due by 5 o'clock on June 9th. And if you do not have one, please contact Brenda Shelmadine in the district office, 688-4411. And you will again be voting on the budget, the Head Start transportation, the capital reserve, and one board seat. So again, if you have any questions, you can type them into YouTube on the bottom, on the right-hand side at the bottom, and we will answer any. If you do not want to do that and you have any questions, please feel free to call me at any time. I would be more than happy to answer those, and I'm sure that Mr. Luther would as well. So at this time, we do not have any questions. So we will conclude this with a picture of some of our youngest and kids that are so much fun, and we can't wait to get them back in our building. This has certainly been a difficult time for everyone, and we appreciate everything that all of our parents and community members have done to help our kids. Our teachers have been awesome in what they've done, but our parents and community have bore the brunt of most of this, trying to manage not only their lives, but their children's lives at home as well. So a big thank you to everyone for that. And like I said, we hope we can be back here September 8th of next year with kids in the building and doing what we do. So thanks again. And do we have to bring this meeting to closure?
I have to read the minutes of the last meeting. At this time, Mr. Murray, welcome.
Approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Approved. There being no further business, the discussion I will adjourn the meeting to 5:00 p.m. Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 for the purpose of opening the ballots on the 2020-2021 propositions 1 through 3 and for the election of one person to the Board of Education. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.